Saat Farkı'ndan merhabalar. Dünyayı konuşuyoruz. Dünyayı EKOTÜRK ekranında buluşturuyoruz. Farklı ülkelerden konuklarla. ABD'nin İran'ın Fordo, Natanz ve İsfahan nükleer tesislerine 22 Haziran'da düzenlediği saldırıların yarattığı hasar tartışılmaya devam ederken İran'ın nükleer programının akıbeti de merak konusu. Trump, ABD uçaklarının saldırıları sonucu İran'ın nükleer kapasitesinin tamamen yerle bir edildiğini savunmuştu. Pentagon'sa saldırıların İran'ın nükleer programını 1 ila 2 yıl gerilettiğini söylüyor. Böyle bir değerlendirmesi var. 12 günlük İsrail-İran savaşında sağlanan ateşkesin ardından İran, Uluslararası Atom Enerjisi Ajansı ile işbirliğini askıya aldı. Ancak nükleer silahların yayılmasının önlenmesi anlaşmasını kısa adıyla NPT'ye bağlılığını da teyit etti. Bu hafta çok kıymetli bir uzmanla nükleer meselesini farklı yönleriyle ele alacağız. İran'ın nükleer programı ne kadar zarar gördü? İran iddia edildiği gibi gerçekten nükleer bir bomba üretmeye yakın mıydı? Saldırılar nükleer silahlanma yarışına nasıl etki edecek? İsrail'in nükleer programı hakkında neler biliyoruz? Tüm bunları konuşacağız. Kolombiya Üniversitesi Kimya Bölümünden aynı zamanda Türkçesi Nükleer Çağ Barış Vakfı olan Nuclear Age Peace Foundation'ın Başkanı Dr. Ivana Nikolic Hughes bizlerle. Dr. Ivana, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome, and it's great to see you on my show again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Feyza. It's a pleasure to be with you.
The pleasure is definitely mine. Well, Dr. Ivana, after the US and Israel attacked Iran's nuclear facilities, of course, questions on the damage and the future of Iran's nuclear program remain. Some conflicting reports and remarks came. But I want to start with your feelings and your thoughts as a scientist who has been working on nuclear issues from very different aspects and angles and advocating for non-proliferation. How did you watch this 12-day war in general? What were your reflections? Do you think will Trump's strikes on Iran really stop its nuclear program? Is it something that everyone should celebrate, or it is quite the opposite? What do you think and feel?
Thank you, Feyza, again for having me and for this question. I definitely watched all of this with a lot of trepidation. I think anything anything other than trepidation was probably a foolish way to be looking at this crisis. But I want to kind of put a couple of things into context here, because I think where the crisis really brings up what I see as sort of three essential ironies that we have been dealing with, and they have really come to the fore with this crisis. The first is that we actually have this conflict started by Israel attacking Iran. Israel is the only country in the world that has an undeclared nuclear arsenal. We don't talk about this. It is Israel actually built nuclear weapons in the 1960s. The first operational weapon is thought to have been built in 1966. When the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty came about, initially negotiated in 1968 and then entered into force in 1970, Israel never joined that treaty. Iran, on the other hand, joined that treaty, immediately signed the treaty in 68, ratified it in 1970, and even following the Islamic Revolution of 1979, they've stayed in the treaty. Now, of course, there's evidence to suggest that they were working on a nuclear weapons program up until 2003, and they have been enriching uranium since 2021 to very high levels of 60%. But those questions aside, they claim not to be working on building nuclear weapons. And that was even an assessment of, U.S. intelligence agencies. Very, very, very recently. So I think that's a really important thing to point out, that we're looking at Israel with its undeclared arsenal of about 90 nuclear warheads is the estimate, and the ability to build another possibly 100. Israel is not party to the NPT, is not subject to any kind of international inspections, not IAEA inspections, which Iran, my understanding is that in 2023, Iran actually was subject to 22% of IAEA's inspections, whereas they only have 3% of the world's nuclear facilities. So they've certainly had some, there's certainly been a lot of scrutiny over what they're doing. The second irony is a little bigger than just looking at the Israeli case. It is the irony of how the nuclear armed states, and there are 9 of them, present themselves in terms of possession of nuclear weapons. They all essentially embed the notion of nuclear deterrence into their policies, claiming quite simply that nuclear weapons keep them safe. And I think that this is a completely unsustainable, policy going forward, to say, I have these weapons because they keep me safe, whereas on the other hand, you're not supposed to get them. I mean, the logical, if you're going to claim that these weapons keep you safe, and I actually happen to reject that logic and would be happy to discuss why.
Right.
But if that is the logic, then the next logical conclusion is that everyone should have nuclear weapons. Everyone should have them to keep safe. That's, of course, preposterous.
And unfortunately, I think after the strikes, that's quite the sentiment that we will see in the coming years. There's a growing risk of, I don't know what you're saying, but yeah.
Exactly. No, and this puts, actually, it shows the importance of nuclear disarmament as a way of kind of pushing forward, continuing this policy of non-proliferation. So what's interesting about the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the only word in the name of the treaty is non-proliferation, but that treaty has 2 other pillars. Another one is peaceful use of nuclear energy, and that, of course, we see, Iran says we're doing this because we want nuclear power. But the other piece of this treaty, the third pillar, is disarmament. And that's spelled out in Article 6 of the treaty. And the nuclear weapon states, the 5, so I said there are 9 nuclear armed states in the world, but they're the 5 original ones,
Ivana,
US, Russia, United Kingdom.
Can you also name them for the audience who are not maybe familiar with the issue?
Yes, absolutely. So the 5 original ones are US, Russia, United Kingdom, France, and China. They are recognized as nuclear weapon states by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And that was a kind of called like a grand bargain between those 5 nuclear weapon states and everybody else, saying, you are not going to proliferate, you're going to not obtain nuclear weapons, but we are going to give up our nuclear weapons. That's the disarmament piece in Article 6 that obligates these 5 nuclear weapon states to negotiate in good faith towards not just nuclear disarmament, but total and complete disarmament. And so those are the 5. Then we have 4 that are outside of the treaty. Israel, I already mentioned. India and Pakistan also never joined the NPT and have nuclear weapons, but they've declared their arsenals. And then we have North Korea, which had been in the treaty and then actually left the treaty just as they were getting ready to develop their nuclear weapons. And of course, now they have their nuclear weapons. So the idea is that we really have to recognize the importance of disarmament and kind of not just being able to threaten other states with nuclear weapons, but admitting that these weapons not just threaten the whole world, but also aren't actually usable, aren't actually the kinds of weapons that you can now, threats have been flying around. And of course, we even saw that in Israel's war with Gaza, saying, an Israeli minister saying we should just use a nuclear weapon on Gaza. It's absolutely preposterous. You absolutely cannot do that for many reasons, including that you'd be hurting yourself. Even if that were just a limited attack. So that's the second irony.
Before moving to the third one, Dr. Ivana, so the NPT itself, as far as I understood from your remarks, the NPT itself is in big trouble, largely because of the failure of the 5 nuclear states to engage in actual disarmament and diplomacy for disarmament. So the NPT also is a very troublesome issue here.
Yes. So this treaty has been, as I said, in force since 1970, and it has held what are called review conferences every 5 years. The last review conference was in 2022. It was supposed to be in 2020, but because of COVID, it was postponed to 2022. That review conference and the previous one in 2015 both ended in what are considered failure to adopt a document that would allow the treaty to move forward. So the parties could not agree on a document to move forward. And really the big impasse is over nuclear disarmament, over the failure to move forward with disarmament. In fact, what we're seeing nowadays is the nuclear armed states are all not just maintaining their arsenals, they're actually building them up, they're modernizing them, they're spending tremendous amounts of money on this as well. And that's really, that's been a key problem for the treaty.
And the third irony comes.
Yes. Well, the third irony is the idea that you're going to use force and accomplish something and actually accomplish it. Perhaps the idea was you were going to accomplish something better than diplomacy, when actually quite the opposite is true. In this particular case, and I think the jury is definitely still out, but it is possible that what we've seen is just a setback for Iran's nuclear program by a few months, maybe a couple of years, whereas a diplomatic negotiation, a diplomatic solution, such as we had with the JCPOA starting in 2015, that agreement was estimated to put nuclear weapons out of the reach of Iran for a period of 10 to 15 years. That's very, very significant. That's a whole lot better than a few months. And so I think the irony here is that we're using war to accomplish something that diplomacy could have arguably accomplished in a much more robust and durable way.
Actually, all of the ironies, like 3 of them, are indeed very important, Ivana. But here, from the last point, I want to ask you something, like as a follow-up, because it's really interesting. When you said this now, it is really, really weird and interesting. Because the JCPOA was already postponing Iran's nuclear, whatever the intention, desire. So after the attacks, let's assume that it's sent back up to 2 years, but still the diplomacy was a better way. So at this point, I want to think about what did you think about the JCPOA? It was really working, I guess, before the U.S. pulled out in 2018, and certainly withdrawing the U.S. withdrawal of the deal was a mistake then. And do you think still a better maybe deal still is the best way to move forward? What do you think about the JCPOA, the original, and the US pullout, and the next possible deal? What are your thoughts?
I think the JCPOA was definitely the way to go. I think that it was a strong agreement. I think it was a mistake for President Trump to pull out of the agreement. Here we are today with in a moment of crisis continued. I hope the ceasefire holds, but it is a continued crisis. I don't think we've seen the end of this. In terms of what's possible, I mean, from my perspective, diplomacy has to be the way forward. Clearly, war and conflict isn't going to solve this. And diplomacy has to be the way forward. I'm concerned about whether and how much we can accomplish, given especially that Iran has now actually, passed a law. Their president has signed a law with the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, and there are questions about whether Iran will even pull out of the NPT. So all of this, there's going to have to be a lot of, you don't just go in and bomb nuclear facilities, which in and of itself is an enormously dangerous thing to do. I mean, I think from the assessments by IAEA, it seems that we have not had a major radiation leak accident. That could have been a very, very problematic thing in and of itself. But how do you sort of rebuild trust to get back to a negotiating table and actually solve this diplomatically, as we should be solving, current conflicts, as we should be solving and addressing the threat that these enormous nuclear arsenals pose to the world. All of this must and should be done with diplomacy.
Right. So bombing on the nuclear facilities also is another risky action.
Yes, absolutely.
Ivana, also I wonder, of course, the damage, in terms of the damage, it's almost, I guess, impossible at least at this early stage. But do you have any, looking at the reports, because you're an expert, definitely, so relying on the available reports, what do you think about the damage? Because there are also some reports saying that Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium was moved before the strike. Is it technically possible? I guess technically it is possible. So what do you think about the damage? And in case of a severe damage, what does it take in terms of time, effort, know-how, technology to get the program back on track? So it's a bit technical question I'm asking here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what's known is that Iran had about 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, uranium enriched to 60%. And my sense is that probably still exists, whether it's in one location or multiple locations. It seems that there was activity around the facility where this was stored, and trucks and movement. That's what I'm kind of getting from the reports. And if this material still exists, people often talk about you have to have 90% highly enriched uranium to build a nuclear weapon. You actually don't. You could stop at something like 60 and build weapons. You'll just it will just be sort of less efficient, might produce a smaller energy yield, and so on. And you probably, from this stockpile, an estimate would be something like 6 or 7 weapons that they could build. But again, the question is intent. The question is that what they really want to do? Why were they enriching to 60%? Was that just a kind of, bargaining chip in some sense? There again, the development going from just having highly enriched uranium to actually having a weapon, there more things have to happen, right? So there's more technically to do. That's probably not my guess is they probably could do something of that sort in a matter of months if that was the decision of the state.
Probably then
making these.
Then I also presume that it has been enriching uranium, as also we see clearly from the reports, but the intention was not to, as you also referred in the beginning, as U.S. intelligence also said, the intention was not to make a nuclear bomb, but of course from now on it might be the opposite. But then at this point I want to also ask you, because this uranium enrichment we have been hearing a lot in the media, in the news reports, So this peaceful use of nuclear technology, but where exactly is the line, like legally and technically, between civilian energy and military intentions? Because here, I think there is no reliable way to assess not only the country's nuclear activities, but also the country's intention. So how to verify this intention? Because at the end of the day, the exact same centrifuge technology is used to produce fuel for civilian reactors. So this can also be used to make nuclear weapons. So this is really hard to draw the line. What can you say as an expert here? Because this is really confusing here.
It's definitely hard to draw the line. I think with the JCPOA, Iran was limited to enriching to just something like 3.5%, enriched uranium. And so that was very clearly for nuclear power generation. These higher percentages do kind of get you closer and closer and closer to a nuclear weapon. What I think this shows is that nuclear power and nuclear weapons development are very closely related. In fact, even if we get to a different treaty, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, even if we actually get to a world where we eliminate these arsenals, there will be a danger that someone can build a nuclear weapon so long as nuclear power exists. That's definitely the case. It is said that countries that have advanced nuclear technology capabilities, nuclear power, countries like Japan and Brazil, it is said that they also could be, a few months or a year or two away from building a nuclear weapon should they decide to do so. Yeah. And so in some sense, that gets us to your question about intent. How do you decide that no, Japan doesn't want to build a nuclear weapon, so their program is okay, right? Versus actually we think or we know that Iran wants to build a nuclear weapon. They have not said so. I've been in these NPT meetings over the last few years where I sit and I listen to statements by Iran. Israel is not in any of the meetings I go to because they don't come to any of the meetings. They're not party to these treaties. Iran is not saying we want to build a nuclear weapon. So, again, the question of intent is definitely the tricky one.
This is all political then, right? I mean, this is a really political issue here that we are talking about because, as you also highlighted, Israel is not even the signatory of the NPT, but still it's not a threat, but the whole focus is on Iran for years. And Netanyahu himself has been claiming that Tehran is only a few years or a few months away from developing a nuclear bomb. He has been saying this for the past 30 years.
Exactly.
So there is really right.
Yeah, no, but it also goes back to these nuclear weapon states that are failing to make progress on nuclear disarmament. By not doing so, they're both sending a message that their nuclear weapons could be a threat to particular countries, and at the same time they're making these weapons seem like this desirable, symbol of status and progress. And it really, what people need to understand is when we talk about nuclear weapons threatening the entire world, we're not exaggerating. They're absolutely the number of weapons, 12,500 weapons in the world. Right. They could destroy the world in multiple ways, in kind of a multitude of ways, killing hundreds of thousands of people and spreading radiation and changing the climate and causing nuclear winter and destroying the ozone layer. This is a problem for all of us. Right. And it's not just about whether one actor, one quote unquote bad actor has these weapons. Former Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, said in 2015, I believe, he said there are no right hands for these wrong weapons. So it's not just a non-proliferation issue. It is both. And if we were able to make progress on disarmament, that would be a reinforcement for non-proliferation. That would be a reason for these other countries to say, oh, look, they're actually disarming. You know, I don't need to go out and spend billions of dollars developing nuclear weapons.
Right. Well, very important points. Dr. Ivana, thank you very much. Really appreciate your analysis. Really appreciate your time and expertise. Thank you for joining my show again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Feyza. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ivana.
Bye.
Bye. Evet, Saat Farkı'nda bu hafta nükleer meselesini konuştuk. İran'ın nükleer programı ışığında biraz aslında bir uzmanla, nükleer çalışan bir uzmanla konuştuk. Biraz işin tekniğini de anlamaya çalıştık. İran'ın nükleer programına ABD'nin saldırılarından sonra ne kadar hasar geldi? Nükleer programın akıbeti bundan sonra ne olur? Diğer nükleer ülkeler, nükleer güç sahibi ülkeler ne yapıyor? Özellikle İsrail ne yapıyor bu konuda? Tüm bunları biraz konuşmaya çalıştık. İşin teknik boyutuna da baktık. Columbia Üniversitesi'nden kimya bölümünden bir isimle, aynı zamanda Nuclear Age Peace Foundation isimli bir think tank, Nükleer Çağ Barış Vakfı isimli bir merkez başkanı Ivana Nikolic Hughes bizlerleydi. Önümüzdeki hafta yine farklı bir konuyla, farklı bir konukla karşınızda olmak dileğiyle. Hoşça kalın.